First of all, what is permaculture, right? Has anybody heard of permaculture? Have you heard of it? So it's new to everybody. Permaculture is permanent agriculture, or permanent culture is what the contraction stands for. So permanent agriculture. And it was developed by Bill Mollison. He was the father of permaculture. But back in the 70s, he'd come up with this. He was a scientist, a teacher, a biologist, a forestry person in Australia. And he studied the rainforest, and he studied indigenous tribes. So he studied how they grew their food and how the forest grew and maintained itself, and then between that he developed these principles of permaculture. So him and his student David Holmgreen, that's another good name to write down because he's actually the one who wrote all the information on it. But what is permaculture besides permanent agriculture? It is just principles and practices, different principles and practices put into place to create sustainable gardens, communities, farms, even businesses are created on permaculture principles. I've got a list of about 15 permaculture principles. One of them is just catching natural resources and using them, putting organic practices in place, doing things to not compact and destroy our soil, but regenerating our soil. What can we do growing our food and regenerating our soil and our earth? Because there's people that's coming after us, right? Our kids, our grandkids, their grandkids. And by the time they get up to grow their food, are they going to be able to? So I think it's our responsibility to take care of what we have now and to do that, be good stewards of our land, right? There's a lot of other principles of permaculture that as we're walking through, I'm going to get some high points on them. But the thing that really drew me to it was the core values of it. And the first one is to care for people. That's our number one responsibility, is to care for each other, I think. To care for the earth and to share the harvest, to share our abundance. What we have in abundance, we should be sharing with others, people in need, or just with our family, whatever. So that's what really pulled me in. I was like, that really spoke to me. So I went on the adventure to learn about it. These are ferns and slates, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And so we did this. We did a rain garden over there because that's something that everybody usually has an issue with. You've got a gutter system coming off. You've got this place right in front of your house that's just full of water. You don't know what to plant there. You don't know what to do there. So you usually put in a French drain or some kind of drainage system to drain it off your property to your neighbors or something. So what can we do?
To your neighbors.
Yeah, give them the problem.
I love it.
That's not really caring for the people, is it? So, what can we do to use this water? What can we do to capture this and use this and solve a problem? That's one of the principles of permaculture. Problem solving. Creative problem solving without a lot of unnatural input. So, we did this rain garden. We did a Hugelkulture bed. It's a way that in Germany they grow their potatoes a lot. They garden a lot using Hugelkulture beds. It means mound garden or hill garden, and it's just a really neat way to garden, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. And then we did, on the back side, we did an edible forest, so we'll talk about that. But first, on these berms, one of the principles of permaculture is observation. That's the very first principle, observation. You should observe your space, your property, your project, whatever. Really observe throughout a whole day, and what everybody recommends and suggests is a whole year, if you can. Because every season is different. The sun solstice is different, the climate's different, the wind's different. Every season is completely different. So observation is very important. Not all of us have the leisure of being able to observe something for a whole year before we actually implement, but at least try to be more observant of everything that's taking place. So that was one of the first things I did when we started this project. I spent a lot of time observing. I would come down here really early in the morning, just sit and watch. Took a lot of walks in these woods to see what the native plants were, what was going to be beneficial, what was going to be a pain in my side, like poison ivy, privet, what we were going to have to deal with, what we could actually benefit from, what was the wildlife like. We have a big deer problem, so what did I need to do about that? The big thing that I watched was water movement. This, before Jason and Shelly bought Petals, which was 25 years ago now, this was a plum and peach orchard. So you can kind of see, if you look up, how it's kind of terraced, right? So the water moves down this way. So I really needed to watch water movement, and I wanted to be able to capture it and use it. Because honestly, guys, this whole area down here is pretty neglected. Like, we are so busy. This is the last thing that we get to work on. I might get to come down here with a team of a few people 5 times a year, maybe. And I want you to take note of that as you look at how good it really looks. Granted, I did do some work down here for this tour. We did spend some time the past few weeks down here, but for the most part, it wasn't a lot of weeding, and that's a big issue for everybody, right? Is weeds. We're gonna discuss that one. So I sat when it was pouring down rain. I put on a rain jacket, come just sit and watch. How's this water moving? The way the water moved is the way these berms are designed. So these berms, what we did, the water moved. I'm gonna get right here. Everybody can hear me? The water moved, still flows really, really fast through here. So we dug out like a swale, which is like a trench, right? We dug out a little swale across this, put the soil over to create the berm. The water goes into the swale, it captures it. Instead of it running on off, it holds the water. And the way this berm is, and on the slope that it's on, the water slowly seeps into this berm. So what that does is that makes the water table under this berm really good, really moist, holds the water good, and waters the roots of this plant. It keeps the roots of the plants in the berm water. So we're catching water, we're harvesting water that's a natural resource and using it to take care of the plants, right? This never gets watered, ever. When we first planted this, which has been about 4 years ago, this is 4 years growth here with no water. We first planted it and we watered, the first few weeks as everything was young. That's it. No water since. So in these berms, another principle of permaculture is to stack functions. So the idea, should this be in front? Yes. Okay. So the idea is, whatever you're doing, whatever system you're putting into place, try to design it or let its purpose be more than one purpose, multiple purposes. So the purposes of this berm has a lot of different functions. Number one reason why we did it is we grow about 85% of everything that we sell, we grow here ourselves. So Miss Gwen and Shelly needs mother plants for propagation and cuttings, right? So everything that's in these berms, they come get cuttings from, so that we can, sell plants. So it's used for propagation, for cuttings. It's used for centerpieces. Whenever we have seminars and classes, we do little arrangements for tables. I needed some things to cut from. So some of the plants I chose, for cutting. It is used for you guys, for educational purposes. So you can see that red twig willow down there, that when you buy it, it's in a little 1 gallon pot. So you can see what it's going to look like 5 years later. More beneficials that we can attract, the better balance of the ecosystem. So let me just stop here and tell you this point. a lot of our agriculture is monoculture, right? I mean, we have all peach trees in a farm. We have all plum trees, all blueberries, all cotton. A big practice in permaculture is polycultures. So a huge diversity of all different kinds of plants, all different kinds of perennials and fruits. And like at my farm, my orchard is just a polyculture. I have everything in one area, everything. And then I have a lot of different perennials and herbs all within the fruit trees to attract beneficials. The more diversity we can get, the more confused the pests are. So if you have all peach trees, right, then all the insects that love to attack stone fruit is going to say, hey, there's a buffet over here, come on. And everybody goes and devours or attacks the peach trees, right? If you have a peach tree, a plum tree, an apple tree, some herbs, some aromatic pest confusers, you've got all these different things, they're confused. Comfrey is also known as the wound heal plant. They used it a lot in like Civil War and different times for healing wounds. You can make poultices out of it. You can make salve. You get stung by a bee, you can take the leaf, rub it on it, it takes the stinger out. There's like so many different uses for comfrey, medicinally and for the garden. I have comfrey planted in between every single one of my fruit trees. A lot of my fruit trees, I have a whole ring planted around it. And what I do is when it finishes blooming, cut all the foliage, all this biomass of foliage, I cut it down, put it around the base of my fruit tree. Comfrey is a dynamic accumulator. Are y'all familiar with that? Dynamic accumulator, what that means is it has a really, really deep taproot. It goes way down into the soil where a lot of our plant or fruit trees or whatever, where there's roots don't actually reach. This goes way down. It mines up minerals and nutrients from that level of the soil up through the plant, up through the root, through the plant, into the foliage. And then when you cut and drop this on top, that's adding fertilizer to the top of your plant. That's a dynamic accumulator. This is a really good one. Yarrow is a dynamic accumulator. Parsley can be a dynamic accumulator. You can chop this and drop it, and it also makes a ground cover, a green manure, a green ground cover. So many different uses. But I have this, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Are we good? I have this in my orchard, like I said, all around my fruit trees. I just chop it. After it finishes blooming, I want the blooms because I want to get all the beneficial insects I possibly can. And then it starts, when it gets hotter, it starts looking a little ratty, So that's a great time. Chop it, put it on top. Fall comes, it starts looking awesome again. And then when winter comes, I chop it, drop it, put it around, and I fertilize my plants.
Is that the foliage or the flowers?
All of it.
The whole thing.
All of it. You can use every part of this plant you can use. And it makes some awesome compost tea. Like, I get so excited about this stuff. It makes some really good compost tea. Just chop these leaves, put it in a 5-gallon bucket, fill it up with water, cover it, let it sit for a few weeks. It's gonna stink to high heaven. Pour up, strain it, use that to water your plants. It's super good. Like, it'll rev up your herbs and your perennials.
And I think it's supposed to have nectar every 45 minutes too.
Okay.
Wow. I have honeybees. So.
Yeah, I have honeybees too. Yeah. Oh, but there's a lot of different plants that, are like comfrey that you can just have so many different uses. So that's just one I wanted to make sure I told you guys about. Okay, so we talked about what Hugelkulture is, where it originated from. The idea behind Hugelkulture is you're taking decomposed wood and putting at the base of the bed. Now, if you take a walk through, permaculture is also all about mimicking nature. What's taking place in nature. Nature's taking care of itself without us having to do anything for it. And look how beautiful and lush, and the ecosystem's in perfect balance. So what can we do to look at that and mimic it? When you take a walk through the forest, you know, and you walk up on a log that's sitting there and it's decomposing and decaying. If you peel that log up, what do you see? Like if you start touching
You
it,
see a lot of little animals scurrying and decay and
mushrooms,
dirt.
fungi, you see all kinds of microbial life. That log is rich and moist. It contains moisture, right? So the idea, the concept behind this is you take decaying, decomposing logs, wood, you put in the bottom of the bed, and the way they do it in Germany is they make like this ginormous mound. I mean, it's just like a huge mound. And they start with logs and then the rest of the things. But I couldn't stand the way that looks. That's like super ugly. So we inverted the idea and we dug a big hole. This was like 5 feet deep. This was our burn pile. We used this for a burn pile. So we dug this like 5 feet deep, and then we put in all this decomposing wood and logs. Then we come in, and for 2 years we worked on filling this hole up. We used fruit that had rotted. You know, we used, when we thought pots of plants were dead, we would dump them in here. Of course, we had a lot of things growing out of here, you know. We used busted bags of compost. We used different ones of us would bring chicken manure sometimes, leaves from cleaning up. Everything went in here, right? Like a giant compost pile. Everything went in here. And then we put a really good layer of soil on top, and then we've done cardboard, and then we've done mulch, and then we've planted. So, but with the decomposing wood, you know, that's holding all that moisture, and then when it's a drought, it's releasing it back into the soil. It's putting microbial life, it's creating a habitat in the soil for all this microbial life to do all this great work for us and fertilize the soil. I don't know why I'm holding this. And fertilize, I'm just talking in it, and fertilize.
You do it well.
Yeah. Am I doing well? Okay. And it fertilizes it for us. So, you know, it's really a great idea. It's really like really smart. And I thought potatoes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What I have planted in here is potatoes, all different kinds of potatoes. And I have marigolds, I have some sage, and in the middle on the teepees are green beans, whole beans, and there's some nasturtiums in there. But the reason that these things are planted together is all about community, which I'm all about building plant communities to help benefit each other. So the potatoes, what they do is they help deter the Mexican bean beetle that attacks beans. The green beans, they deter the Colorado potato beetle, which attacks your potatoes. So it's a perfect relationship. Then we have sages that I've put in here, and I probably really should have more, you know, amongst it, but it is what it is. That's all I had. That's all I could find up there. So I've got just culinary sage that deters flea beetles. So that's the whole guild here. A guild is a plant community. One main plant or 2 main plants, and what can I plant with that as a plant community to all support and help each other. The more we can do that, the more of those practices we can put into place, the less I've got to come in here and try to spray for Colorado potato beetles, or I've got to spray for flea beetles, or whatever, and then I'm using chemical. And then when I spray that, I'm going to kill all my beneficials. So it's just an endless cycle. Not watered this. We planted all these potatoes and all of these things about, I think 3-4 weeks ago maybe. We're a little late on getting our potatoes in the ground. We watered it that day. It hasn't been long enough. The fact that it's going to keep decomposing and it's going to keep breaking down, sinking down. So this is not an application where you want to plant a fruit tree or a perennial plant. You want to plant an annual plant so that every year when you pull that out, you can add some more soil or compost to your bed.
This is my main focus of this plant.
cover to help weed suppression. I'm looking for things that are going to be dynamic accumulators to where it can mine up those nutrients we talked about. I'm looking for things that are going to attract beneficials and pollinators. I'm putting in multiple uses. I want it to be medicinally used for me, culinary uses for me. That's just a plant community. And then I'm looking at the tree individually. What's the problems with this tree? What's the solutions? Like we talked about earlier. So that's what this plant community is. That are out here, that are planted, really don't have a lot of problems. Like they really don't. A jujube, we haven't found any problems with a jujube. A serviceberry, there's no problems with the serviceberry other than the birds get the berries before we do. So there's not like a lot of things really to plant to help benefit that as far as fighting insects or disease. But what I've done is planted plants that I can fertilize with comfrey. Plants I can fertilize with parsley. It'll attract beneficials to help pollinate, just creating a huge diversity of life. And so our idea behind this is we're putting in all these trees and all these little communities around them to benefit. And then eventually this whole area here is going to be just covered in different medicinal plants, different edible plants, and stuff that you can just like take a walk through the path, pick and eat as you go, and enjoy, That's the idea behind this edible forest. So I've got, that's a serviceberry. Y'all familiar with serviceberries? They're like a little blueberry. They're really good. That one is spice bush. Now spice bush alone, if you have stone fruits, if you have peaches, plums, whatever, spice bush will be a good one to plant as a companion with your stone fruit because they help control weevils, and weevils is where your plum cuculio is going to come from, and that is an insect that there's no organic spray to take care of that insect. So that's what I'm saying. A lot of the things that I have down here are actually the companion, but I needed edibles that are going to do well in the shade. So we've got serviceberry can take some shade. The jujubes are actually full sun, but they're to this front edge and they get enough sun. I've got pawpaws. Pawpaws are great. I've got, there's some yellow root, which is a great medicinal herb. We've got mayhaw. I've got elderberries. I love elderberries. I make elderberry cough syrup for this ridiculous cough that I have. Is that the fruit? The elderberries are, that big one right back there in the corner is an elderberry. And they're native. They're all over our wood edge. Here we've got sassafras tea. And spice bush, there's spice bush tea. It's got a lot of medicinal properties. Everything in here is for some kind of consumption. And we've got chokeberries. They can take some shade. I've got a Coosa dogwood. I've got mulberry. There's the Coosa dogwood. That's the mulberry, native mulberry. Can't beat mulberry. I love it. And that is an olive. That's the Albertina olive, which is one that we can grow here. Let's see. This is that red sweet willow I was talking about. This one's called a red tree, corkscrew.
Does this one require water like the other willows require?
She's got it coming right into it.
Yep. You can see, like, there's this dip. That's why the rain garden's right in that spot. Because there's this dip where water just set and it rushes down to here. Sky's super happy here. Or girl, whatever it is.
How old is that tree?
5.
That's
5.
not bad. That's not bad.
We started planting these berms 5 years ago, and that's one of the first things I put in here. And it's like this big.
Not bad at all.
Isn't that cool? I know it. Watch this beehive. I don't think it's very active, but just in case.
Don't fall over.
Well, we're out of time, you guys. I'm sorry. Yeah. I could talk to y'all for 100 hours. Y'all ready? All right.